What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. We've got about 3 days left of 2021, so it's about time that we look at my top 10 list of games for 2021. It was a little bit difficult putting this list together as I enjoyed quite a few more games than 10 this year, whether it was with my buddies, on stream, off stream, single player, multiplayer and all of that. So I just wanted to cover some of these titles. Some of them will be quite obvious to you why they're on this list and some might just surprise you. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. At number 10 we have a small, I guess it's a musical platformer is the genre that you can call it, but a game by the name of The Artful Escape. Now let me start this off first by saying that for a game to be on my list and to be in my top 10 is not necessarily a game that I played the most or that I got the most content out of, or for that matter that got the most hype around it. It can sometimes be something as simple as a game hitting me at just the right time. And I was going through some stuff when Artful Escape came out, and it was a game that I knew nothing about and literally found out about it a day before it would actually release. So I kind of went in blind. I really liked what I saw in the trailers, and overall it just really surprised me. The 4 hours that you're going to spend with the game are really magical and almost like a space opera music journey that you go through with the protagonist as you essentially learn about their past, and you have this general platforming that's to a specific musical, kind of taste. And I think if you watch the trailer of this and if it just even remotely piques your interest, then I definitely advise you to give this a try, because the trailer very much undersells just how good, how much character, how much soul this game really has. But like I said, it's a game that I played once, I finished it, I haven't touched it again. But it really elicited a very specific emotional response from me, and it was just the right thing that I needed at just the right time. And that is why it's super easy for me to include this into my top 10 list. Coming in at number 9 is a game called Riders Republic by Ubisoft. And this is in the same vein as old extreme sports games like SSX and Steep, and therefore you have these sports disciplines, in this case mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding and so on, that you compete against other players and you essentially try to race them or do stunts or anything like that. Now it's not so much a simulation as it is an arcade reference to these sort of games, so it's you need not worry if it's going to be taking itself too serious or something like that, because it absolutely doesn't. Riders Republic was a big surprise for me because it was something that was on my peripheral, and because I thoroughly enjoyed games like SSX in the past on PlayStation, and because you don't really get stuff like this anymore, I kind of looked at it, but I always thought, it's Ubisoft, and unfortunately you do have this open world thing that injects itself into the game, and kind of like having to, rush around and pick up collectibles and all that stuff. Basically, I wasn't looking forward to playing Assassin's Creed with a snowboard. So in some cases that ended up not being that way, and in some cases it unfortunately did. But I do find myself returning to this game for a couple of hours at least every week, as there's this constant sort of thing that you can keep grinding at. You can keep unlocking more gear, you can keep unlocking better stuff that you can compete with, better events and all of that. And I haven't really tapped into it too much in the multiplayer sphere. It's not something that me and my friends have played together, but definitely from a single player perspective, and again because there isn't a lot like this out there, it was thoroughly enjoyable for me, and definitely funny, some of the situations you can get into, and the falls and all of that. And yeah, I just really enjoyed their kind of like push into almost like the comic-y side of it. And after playing the beta, this definitely propelled me into picking up the game. So if you can pick up Riders Republic at a sale price, and it's something that you just want to have kind of like in the background and every once in a while tap into, it really is a great choice. You don't, again, like I said, get a lot of games of this caliber out there, and so it has been quite enjoyable to actually dip into every once in a while. Number 8 gives us Tribes of Midgard. Now this is a survival action RPG by Norsefell. I think it's Norsefell Games, or they're just called Norsefell, but in any case, this is a kind of like a survival game with a bit of a twist on it. Obviously it has this Norse mythology background, and you pick different kinds of Vikings basically to play with. They all have different abilities. Some of them are better at range, some are better close, some buff others. And then essentially you have to go out of your village, you have to get materials, you have to, you know, level up your equipment, level up your armor, basically level up yourself, because every couple of days your village gets attacked by these massive giants. Now that's not the only threat to your village, of course. Every night cycle you also have this encroaching darkness, or encroaching cold rather, that is essentially bringing enemy to your gates as well. And this is a game that I have to say, once I started playing this, it really took me, and it consumed quite a bit of the hours, especially once I was trying to unlock, because there are certain conditions that you have to do and certain things that you have to do to be able to unlock all of the different characters that you can play with in the game, but also all the different items. The game of course has a season pass, because which fucking game doesn't have season passes these days? And I don't really know if that model really works for something like this. It's not that I'm saying that I wanted Tribes of Midgard to be a once and done kind of thing, but it is kind of weird, the whole way of like how the season passes, you know, injected itself into the game. But I have to commend Norsefell as well for, you know, trying to do different events. Like there was a Christmas event and there was an event before that, and they're constantly bringing new cosmetic content to the game, which of course is something that a lot of people, you know, really dig. And so that's great. Now from a gameplay perspective, the game hasn't changed all that much, except now with season 2 coming out, there's a new, you know, thing with boats in and all of that. So definitely do check it out if you haven't seen it yet. It is a fantastic game to enjoy with friends, but I'll say this, up to a point. There is a scaling mechanism built into the game that with the amount of players that can play with, of course you can play with parties of up to 10, but the point is that makes enemies really difficult to deal with. And often I found it, or not often, but at least I found that when I started out playing the game and I didn't understand it that well yet, that it was better to have smaller parties because it wasn't so punishing and so difficult. But nonetheless, this is something that I enjoyed on stream and off stream quite a bit, made quite a bit of content on it as well, and actually really enjoyed this year. So that's Tribes of Midgard. And then number 7. A game that I didn't think had any chance of being on this list. I took forever to actually start playing it, and that's of course Returnal on PS5. House Marquee, they knocked it out of the park with this one, and to be honest, it's only because the list is so strong going forward from here for me that it's not higher on my my list of top 10. But Returnal really surprised me for 2 reasons. One, just how incredibly polished the game is, and just how it gets its hooks in you once you get used to the loop and essentially how it plays. Now what this is this is a roguelite shooter, third-person shooter, that you essentially try to escape from these different biomes. You unlock weapons, and those weapons have upgrades. You have abilities that you can unlock, and that's basically, you know, it. And I'm oversimplifying this, of course, you know, immensely, and anybody that's played the game will agree with me on that. But that's the point though, that's where you start from. And so that sounds not all that amazing on paper, and you're kind of like, oh okay, well I mean I'm sure I've played this before. But then again, like I said, once you get into it, the game just kicks ass. Its visuals are fantastic, the control is super tight. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you can expect from House Marquee. And the thing is, and this was my second reason why this game surprised me, is that generally speaking, I am not a huge fan of this genre of games. I have played them tons, but they tend to frustrate me. I tend to suck very much at them. And so there comes a point where I'm just like, okay, this is too difficult now. I'm just not having any fun. It's taking me like 8 hours to progress, 4 hours to progress and all that. And that's something that I was scared of with this game, but ended up not being an issue at all. Don't get me wrong, the game is hard as nails. And once you get deep into it and you actually see just how much bullets and how much enemies and how much shit the game can throw at you, it really is amazing. But as usual with games of this type, it has that whole thing where once you accomplish something, once you make it through some really difficult area, it's just fantastic, and the feeling is obviously very elating. But it's difficult to call a game like this like a system seller. But in the time when the PS5 didn't have a lot going on for it and Returnal came out, it was very much a system seller. Now this is the funny thing, like I said, I didn't play it at that time. I took months to come around to actually playing this game, and there's a part of me that actually really, you know, I'm upset about that, because by that time, you know, my friends had all experienced it, you know, sort of like the interest in the game had waned just a little bit, and also some of it had been spoiled for me. So again, if you are into this kind of thing, if you're a fan of Housemarque stuff, and if you're a fan of roguelites, then definitely I cannot recommend this enough. And don't think for the fact that this is number 7 on my list of top 10 that it's any indication. That's just how good all 10 of these games that we've been talking about and that we are going to still be talking about are. But definitely check out Returnal, and that's at number 7. And number 6, and perhaps very controversially for some, I imagine, is Halo Infinite. And this is really, really difficult for me because Halo Infinite, and I think I think we're gonna get into trouble for some of the stuff that I have above this in the list, but you know what, fuck it, right? It is my list and I'm just being honest. But Halo Infinite for me is such a weird thing, because I was insanely elated when they suddenly just cold dropped the multiplayer on it, and it is so good. It is so good playing a shooter like this again, which is so refined with fantastic control, amazing graphics, just a very good sandbox to work in, from like the big matches where you actually have vehicles into the very tight, 5v5 or 10v10 or whatever, like the deathmatch kind of situation. The multiplayer is rock solid, and with the season pass that they have in there, and plus the content, sort of that is being planned into 2022, I'm really interested to see exactly what can come from this. Of course, there's a bunch of features that are still coming to the game, which could make or break this, or in a way, actually indicate to us what the longevity is of this game, and whether it's unfortunately going to be something that people don't really speak about anymore after 6 months, which many content creators have voiced their opinion and said that this could very well be the case. So yes, it is very much a situation of what comes after this now, because that gets me to the part why this is number 6 on my list, and the part that's not that great for me is, while I was really, really looking forward to the single player, it kind of landed with like a dull thud for me. And it's weird, because as a character, Master Chief is fantastic. The story around it, the world building that they do with this, or universe building that they do with this, has always been good. But I don't understand what the point of the single player of this game was. And what I mean by point is what the point of the story was. It's perhaps indicative of a new trilogy or a new 5 series game or whatever that's coming out, but it kind of feels like we didn't get very far in the story. And I think what hurt it a lot was the sort of like open worldness of it. I played this game on stream a bunch of times, and while something that occurred to me was, I'm having fun because the sandbox is that good, right? And it's these minute by minute things that can happen on the battlefield that can't be scripted, and you can see suddenly someone will just show up with a vehicle and come exploding and flying over you, or ignite a bunch of their buddies with grenades. And the communication that you get from the enemies, and the sound and the music and the cues and everything is top notch. But it's just super sad that this is all baked into an open world game that then doesn't have these in a way scripted set pieces that make Halo. It sounds weird when I'm sitting here saying that, on one side I like the open worldness of it because of the sandbox, but on the other hand, I also want kind of like my hand taken and led through a story. But that's really the thing, though. I feel like with Halo games in the past, you've always had these open areas. I mean, Halo 1 featured, large open areas of the ring that you could ride around in, but eventually you would be funneled into these story moments. And while that does happen in Halo Infinite, the problem is that these story moments that you get funneled into are extremely bland. And so then the strongest part of the story exists outside this, in these moments that you make yourself. And perhaps that's a really good thing. And perhaps 6 months from now or a year from now, I'll look back at it much more favorably and say, you know what, actually, that was really actually fucking tight. But at the moment right now, for me, it feels as if the gameplay that I create in these open world areas, in these outside areas, is really the high point of the game. And so the story is really weak. The motivation of some of the characters is really weak. The eventually where we end up in when it's all said and done is weak. So that's not a good thing, and I definitely think that could have been a lot better, a lot tighter. And that's unfortunately why the game is number 6 on my list of top 10. Coming in at number 5, and we're halfway there, is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart on the PS5. Now, I'm a huge Ratchet and Clank, or a huge, let's say, console platformer fan from back in the day. And Ratchet and Clank is basically, you know, a callback to those games from the past, and is just, again, you know, people throw these words out like system seller and all of that for the PS5, because let's be honest, a lot of the games which people were looking to play on PS5 this year were delayed into 2022. And so a lot of these games where people were saying, God damn, I better get a PS5 because this or this or this is coming out, unfortunately didn't make it. Now, luckily Ratchet and Clank was not delayed, and this actually did land for us in June. And it is, although it's a little bit short, to be honest, it is a fantastic trip back in time in a way to essentially what made these games work. And of course, using the advanced, you know, graphics and all of that that's capable with the PS5 to really showcase some amazing, you know, set pieces and great, you know, 60 FPS gaming. So I gotta say, the usual thing that I like about Ratchet and Clank is the leveling of the weapons, and, you know, essentially unlocking, like, and, you know, sometimes you have these arenas that you can play, and then you can really go deep on the weapons. You can find weird combinations that you can use, and all of that is in the game here. But like I said, there's not a lot of it. This game is not massive, and I don't imagine that you'll spend anywhere above, it's even difficult for me to say because I went back and finished it at least 2 more times, and not everybody's going to want to do that. But I think this is kind of like a 10 to 15 hour done kind of situation. And that's fair because that is actually a very decent length for a game. But it's because I enjoyed playing in the sandbox of this game so much, because I enjoy the characters so much, and because I enjoy the gunplay so much, that I wanted more of it. And that's not a bad thing. It's always good to want more of a good game. But then on the other hand as well, one must say that a tight 8 or 10 hours is better than, you know, like a kind of okay 25 hours. So, you know, it is what it is. But definitely Ratchet and Clank is one of the reasons that I'm happy that I was able to get hold of a PS5 this year, and it is a game that I really enjoyed. Coming in at number 4, oh boy, this is going to be a one where you'll get a bunch of people that'll agree with me and a bunch that won't, is Outriders. Now, like I said at the beginning when I was talking about Artful Escape, that for some, you know, some games make it onto the list because they're really amazingly good games. Some games make it onto the list because of the way that they made me feel while I was playing them, even if it was just for an hour or 2 or 4 hours or whatever. And then some games make it onto the list because it's something that I keep on returning to. Now, Outriders has been a huge success for me on the channel, first of all, but secondly, it's also been something that I've enjoyed playing on and off stream, theory crafting builds, sitting here writing notebooks full of shit to try and make builds and try and make things work and to try and figure out stuff of the game. And the point is that all of those hours that I've spent with it, the majority of them have been very awesome to me. I do find myself as one of the lucky ones that in the time that the game went through a lot of its woes with logging in and all of that, with stuff getting deleted, this is not something that affected me. And I find, and I'll be honest, that makes me one of the lucky ones, because this is wildly still a problem. I know that Game Pass people still have an issue with this game. Connectivity still kind of is a problem sometimes isn't. This is unfortunately the nature of a game that has a peer-to-peer connection basis, but a game like this that has a peer-to-peer connection basis. And there's a bunch of stuff that I can look at when I look at Outriders and say, they did this wrong, or they should have done it this way, or I don't understand why they did it that way. But there's also a bunch of stuff in this game that just works and that just clicks and that is just really fun. And it's when these things come together, it's when you spend time with friends, it's when you make a build and you're like, holy shit, this smokes, that the game really becomes more fun, that the game becomes as enjoyable as it has been for me. Now, recently, of course, there's a DLC that was announced for this that's dropping in 2022, but from the publisher's side, or the developer rather side, they also made some changes to the game which brought a whole swath of players back. More specifically, they removed time. They did a bunch of stuff, but the most controversial one, I suppose, is the fact that they removed timers from the expeditions, and this opened up the game a lot and really allowed people to play the game the way they want to play the game, which is a big thing when it comes to, first of all, looter shooters, but then also secondly games like this. And it's something that you'll often find people who play The Division, who play Destiny, who play games like this will complain about and say, don't force me to play a piece of content the way you want me to do it, by putting in a timer or putting in a specific damage cap or anything like that. Let me take 5 hours to do it if I want to. Let me do it in 15 seconds if I want to, but let me play the game that I want, or the game the way that I want to play it. And it definitely seems that we're not quite there. We're not 100% there yet, but People Can Fly have made some steps in that direction, and you can clearly see that with some of the changes that they've made. And while there are still some balance changes which will most likely happen, and still some fixes which need to happen, the game is in an extremely healthy state right now. Again, this is according to me. I stream this where I, get people to come in and run with me and play with me. And I also create a lot of content for this while I also play it in a single player. And for me, it is in probably the best state it's been yet. So if you can pick this up at a bargain price, if you're kind of on the fence and you don't want to play full price, if you can pick it up at a bargain price, you are looking at least at 15 to 20 hours of entertainment here. And that's if you just go with the one character and you just start gearing up for later expeditions. If you really go down the rabbit hole and you start making multiple builds and you get one character of each of the 4 types to the maximum level with the best gear and the best build that you want to play with, you're looking at many more hours than that. So absolutely, from that perspective, good value for money. But again, like I said, a little bit controversial because for some people, Outriders was a massive letdown. These are some of the content creators who I speak with regularly who really liked the game or really wanted to like the game, but unfortunately felt let down. So for them and for the situation as a whole, I can only hope that what we're getting with the DLC that comes hopefully in the early parts of 2022, my suspicion is that we might see it on the 1-year anniversary of the game, which is of course April 1st. That would be something that pushes the game even more in a positive direction. But in any case, that's Outriders at number 4. And we have arrived at the top 3. And for me, the number 3 on my list is Forza Horizon 5. Now, if you at the beginning of the year told me that 2 sports games would be in my top 10, my reaction probably would have been something like this.
Bullshit!
But that is actually the reality. We do have 2 sports games on my list, which is something that's not usually the case for me. But Forza Horizon continues to be a fantastic franchise just in terms of the control of the cars, the graphics, the set pieces, the different vehicles, all the activities that you can do, with them essentially just always doubling down and just making more content for the game. It is something that I don't sit and play for hours on end, but I do return to every once in a while. The game has events and activities that are constantly going on, but more than that, there's always something to do in the game, always something to progress towards, always something to unlock more. I do like the fact that this isn't simulation driving, so it is something that's more for a layman like me, that I do kind of like the more arcadey style of it. And while I don't think that this year's version of Forza Horizon has the best soundtrack, I did prefer Forza Horizon 4 soundtrack, was just somehow better for me. That is that, and among some other small things, can probably be the only complaints. There's some netcode issues at the beginning of the game. It's kind of weird for some of the things that people are getting banned for, like there's a lot of funny things going on, but overall my experience with the game has been very enjoyable, and it really is a fantastic looking game. If you have it with all the bells and whistles on, you're sitting, having a couple of drinks, just blasting through the races and just having a really good time. So overall, I thoroughly enjoyed Forza Horizon, and I continue to enjoy it. Like I said, I spend a couple of hours with this at least a week, just sort of, progressing towards more race unlocks, progressing towards more stars. And this is really the thing that is indicative of a game that is fun, is something that, you don't necessarily have to plow 20 hours into it in a row to be like, okay, cool, I'm done with this now. But something that you can, like a great hobby, return to periodically and sort of keep on chipping away at. That's Forza Horizon 5. Then number 2, Psychonauts 2. Now, I have a huge love for adventure games or storytelling adventure games from the past. It's basically That and strategy games to a degree is what I cut my teeth on back in the day when I started gaming. I was a huge fan of the old Sierra Quest games and, you know, things like Space Quest, Police Quest, blah, 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 you know, all of those. And so I've always held a very special place in my heart for games like that. Of course, there were mature ones like Gabriel Knight. And so over time, this is just something that I've really enjoyed. It's always been a guilty pleasure of mine. Now, what's funny with these games is they can be deeply personal in a way, especially if the story is really good. But mostly these are for your own kind of like, it's weird to say, for your own consumption. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes I've found that these games are not fun games to play with other people. Not always, not always. Sometimes, I mean, in the past, we've had great situations where you and a couple of buddies play together, and that way you can, you know, 3 heads are better than 1, and you can sort of solve the puzzles and things like that a lot better, because games like Psychonauts, for instance, it's an adventure game that tells a story, but it has platformy bits, it has puzzles that has to be solved and all of that, and certainly, you know, more heads are better than 1. But getting back to my original point, a lot of the times with these games are, you know, personal experiences that you have by yourself, and you play the game and the story unfolds, and, you know, it's great like that. I played Psychonauts 2 on stream a couple of times, and I actually do think that people enjoyed it because the storytelling is that good. But this is just, again, Schafer, you know, firing on all cylinders. It's a fantastic story as it tells itself, and really a game that we waited far too long for. And it could have very easily been one of those situations where you wait so long for something that it cannot match up to any kind of expectation that you have for it, and it will come out and you'll be like, okay, it's good, but, you know, I wanted it to have this, I wanted it to have that, and so on. That's not the case for me, at least with Psychonauts 2, and I feel that the story was fantastic, the voice acting was great, the humor was great. And again, like I said, just the usual quality that you can expect from a studio like Double Fine. And for me, the case is that this year was a harsh lesson in certain cases where you kind of have that mentality of going, this is a AAA studio, this is pedigree people right here. You cannot, you know, get a dud from this, only to be let down. So it is, however, very, very awesome when you do realize that there are still studios out there that you can depend on and that aren't going to let you down and are going to give you just massive amounts of value for your money. So if you are looking for a great story experience, a fantastic adventure game, you really can't go wrong with Psychonauts 2. Because of what I said about my number 2 game, I'm sure you could possibly guess what my number 1 is, but that's of course Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, the strong narrative, you know, pieces in a game are always going to win out for me, because like I said, for me, a tight 4 hours or a tight 8 hours of gameplay experience is much better than a medium, you know, 20 to 30 hours. In these days where we all have massive schedules and we're all busy all the time, and, you know, you can't really sit down and go, you know what, I've got like 50 hours to put into a game, let's go. And this is a conversation that I often have with friends and collaborators and other content creators, is, you know, how your time is basically being respected by a game. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy, while it is a movie license, and while there is a little bit of like, I wouldn't call it a learning curve, but for me to really start liking the game, I had to break away from my interpretation of what the Guardians of the Galaxy was according to the MCU, or in a way according to the comics. I had to break apart what I thought they should sound like, because I've heard these characters in the MCU, and so they don't sound the same in the game, and automatically my brain's telling me, no, that's wrong, that doesn't sound right. I had to get rid of all of that. And then once you do that, and trust me, it doesn't take long, because the presentation of this game is top notch. The acting, the voice acting, all of that in this game is ridiculously high quality, to the point where, to me, it rivals what we've seen. And I know this is crazy for me to even say, so let's not even compare it to the MCU or anything like that. Let's just say that this stands up on its own legs, right next to, and I'm sure for some people even above, what we've seen from the MCU. For me, this is also partly due to the fact that this is a lot truer to the actual source material, meaning the comics, because of course Guardians of the Galaxy is a little bit, you know, different than your standard, you know, fare that you get from comics, and therefore it kind of stays safe in the MCU, whereas the game goes fucking ham and goes crazy into the, you know, the craziness of it. but I have to say that this is just very well put together, and as a package this is insane, and it respects your time. The time that you'll spend with this game will feel like really tight and enjoyable, and the point is, when you walk away from this, at least for me, it was a case of saying that was just long enough. I enjoyed that so much, every second of it, and while you would want more of it, getting more of it would actually deplete from the quality of the actual product. But that's Guardians of the Galaxy, really showing that movies or comics or other IP can be translated into games and can be successful and can be done in such a way as to be its own thing while still tapping into this, while not being a copy of something or trying to represent itself as something else. Definitely pick this up, especially if you can get it at a budget price. This is one of the top games of the year, and I don't necessarily want a sequel of it, but my god, do I want to see more stuff like this with the characters that I love and in the universes that I really love to visit. But that's Guardians of the Galaxy coming in at number 1. And that's it for my list of top 10. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel about it, how you feel about my rankings, where you would put what, how angry you are at me for, putting something on the list that you don't really like. But more importantly, I just want to thank you for watching this, especially if you watch it this far. This is a slightly longer than usual video, but I'm very passionate about games and I love talking about this stuff. But I also do love hearing your opinions about it. So please do go ahead and let me know what your top 10 for 2021 was. But thank you so much, and have a fantastic morning, a great afternoon, and a super awesome evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me.